Okay, before we begin, if you haven't done the module review, do it now. Is there anyone who's not done it? Everyone's good. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm just about winning back so far. Oh damn it, one more person's going to come. I said it would only be single figures. See?
Oh, there he is.
You ruined my bet.
The bet?
Yeah.
What was it? What was fucking
So it will be single figures in this room today.
Oh, was I the double digit?
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's not on, man.
I'll get that.
Ah, it's been blown to all shit now. Look at when he's coming.
Disrespect.
Please disrespect, like,
To be
fundamentally.
fair, it's gonna be. I was looking forward to this. I have to come in.
Well, that's your problem. He gives me the S.
Excuse me. There's a whole row here.
Take your seats and shut up while you're coming in late.
I'm gonna move that road
That's
apart.
I don't care whose fault it is. Disrupting everyone here. Going out with to get ready.
Well, because I had to
What are you,
pop
fucking
in
no mirrors, eh?
I had to get dressed, I had to shower. And we would have been on time.
It's fucking 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We eat breakfast. They breakfast at fucking 7 o'clock this
I
morning.
wasn't awake last night. We would have been on time if there wasn't these two walking so
Half the fucking
slow.
day is gone.
Just saying.
Let me see.
I'm shocked and appalled.
I didn't want to walk fast, you know.
Apparently it makes you wetter if you walk fast. It's what a brainiac.
That makes sense.
If you
Yeah.
walk, you dry that.
I'm wet, but I don't care. We would have been on time.
Are you done now, Pixie?
Yeah, I'm done, sorry.
Time to get into
No, we'll have
something.
an argument about this later.
Fuck.
It feels like I'm taking ages.
Joe, have you done that review now?
I'm doing it now.
Because we're all waiting on you, dude.
Ah.
If everyone else has done it, we're just waiting on you, man. And be nice and all, because I'll know. Question for everyone. Given the... I gotta be careful what I say here, but given the difficulties that people have had this week selecting modules for next year, have you all managed to do this?
No.
Is there anyone who you haven't managed yet?
It's usually second-year option modules.
That is a problem.
Yeah.
Have you asked anyone about it?
Yeah, and they're just like, oh, everyone's having problems. I'm like, well,
Who did you go and see?
I emailed, I think it was my mentor.
Who is?
I can't remember Richard?
Thomas.
His name?
If you have time, like, you know the people on the ground floor of Digital Technium, they'll sort that for you. They're probably actually the best people to go and see about this. They can go into the system and do it for you as you stand there. They will be there at 3 if you have time today, but they're also in all the way through Easter anyway. So you know, it sounds like
And
Yeah.
then you click where you have your courses.
a very similar
Scroll down to my
to got access to the system.
Wait.
Or you can drop them a line,
dashboard, yeah.
student
And
and
then you
school
scroll
or
courses.
something like that.
Wait,
Or
so
you
the
do that
survey,
on
the
the
one
thing.
with back.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go where you,
Courses,
yeah,
okay.
and then you scroll down to the bottom.
Have you done the module review?
Oh, yeah.
Shit. Well, I suggest you do it now.
You need a module feedback, is it?
Yeah.
Are you doing it now?
No, I'm just
I need to
I thought I'd done good then. To remind you of it. Can I just... This isn't going to be an indicative list by any means, but has anyone chosen MS-232 Game Over Critical Game Studies? Just one.
When I went to go to pre-selection, it was broken, but when if it's back up, then
It's been back up for like 4 days.
Has it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was one on
email reading on you. But only one.
documentary.
And it's
Oh
me.
yeah.
Yeah, well that's causing
I think
me
I gotta do
problems
that.
with you. But,
Digital media.
it does mean that I have less marking to do, which I'm always happy with. And for the rest of you, why? Why haven't you chosen my module for year 3? What, are you too good for me or what? Huh? Yeah, I don't want you to.
Wow.
The other day to see if I
But
was
smart
on the
students
module.
I'm talking about, not the dregs of the class.
I'll see myself on it then, haven't
We haven't chosen anything yet.
I'd recommend you do it. For those of you who haven't chosen anything else, I'd recommend giving it some thought. It's only like the most important year of your degree. It's only what, 60%, well, nearly 70% of your degree grade is about. It's worth giving it some attention, I'd say. It says week 6 on the slides, but it's not week 6. It's week 9. It's one of those where I updated the slides but forgot to update the title. No, you can't go on.
Pardon?
And you did it.
It's alright, it's not amazing. It's nice coffee, really.
Never actually tried coffee.
Yeah, it does seem right, doesn't it? Yeah. It's like water.
It's really weird, like no face.
Yeah, when I opened it, I faced somehow. I don't know.
Oh, it's supposed to be.
I think it's just because it's like. It's in the way.
I like ice coffee.
Yeah.
Iced coffee is one of these things like non-alcoholic beer. What's the fucking point?
Yeah.
Like,
I drink
do you know what I
coffee,
mean?
but I don't like it.
If you don't want to drink alcohol, don't drink beer. It's fairly simple. There's other options available. Water, coffee, pop. I don't know, whatever people drink. Like, I tend to avoid non-alcoholic drinks. I don't see the point. But squash, that's a non-alcoholic drink. I was promised alcohol today. People haven't come.
Well, Abby's not here, so.
Yeah, exactly.
And Abby was supposed to be sorting it out.
Never rely on somebody who works in Boney Mine Pub.
Oh, she's at home as well. She's not doing it.
She's not even in Swansea.
Abby, where is
Do
she?
you about we should make sure?
Where'd she live?
Do you about we should make sure?
No.
Remember first year we went to Thailand?
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Oh,
sense. Why are you on the wrong week? That's not this week. That's week 10. That's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard.
That's right. Tomorrow he's
Right. Are you finished now?
yeah,
Superb. Alright. Have you done it?
No, it's week 9.
Yeah, it's week 9.
Well, have you done it?
Done it.
Superb. Right. Are we ready to begin? We all happy? Are you three going to shut up for 2 minutes? Alright. So, this lecture does actually include some important material, which I haven't flagged up to people previously because it's kind of a social experiment to see who will actually turn up for this session. So, well done to all of you that have. Although, I did actually think that there would be single figures of people, so I'm a bit disappointed that I got that wrong. But I'm happy to be proved wrong, so, that's good. The focus of the lecture, really, is on alternative social media. But, in order to understand what the alternatives to social media could be, we need to understand some of the operating principles of what's called the dark web. Does anyone have any experience whatsoever using the dark web? We have a couple of hands. Okay, good. Anyone at the back? Does this mean anything to you, dark web?
I've always wanted to figure out how to find it, but just because I'm curious, but who knows how to do that? I think, at least, it's difficult to remember with you guys because
I like did one lecture on MS-100 and then was off for like 3 months. Did anyone at any time in the first year tell you about a service called Z Library?
Oh yeah, I use that.
Was that me?
I think so.
Yeah.
I've used it before anyway.
Okay, good, good. You are therefore aware that Z Library no longer exists?
Yeah, I can't find it anymore.
Ah, but it does exist. But it does exist. It hasn't gone anywhere. It still exists. Is there anyone still using Z Library? Good.
Because of you told me to don't.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I've tried using like the Tor network to access it, but I don't really know how it works.
Can you, Caitlin, after this lecture, or do ring it now if you wish, send me an email that only has a subject line that says Z Library ? And then I will send you instructions about how to access it, okay? Including a link which will work, which will take you right to it. If you used it in the past and you don't have an account on it, you will have to sign up for an account, but that's fine, and then you will be back running with it, okay? Z Library is a service that was set up about 6-7 years ago as an offshoot of something called the LibGen project. And the LibGen project was an attempt to digitize academic material and make it available for free. The argument being that a lot of academic material exists behind paywalls. So, as university students, most of those paywalls are actually broken down for you. If you want to access academic material, you can do so through your Swansea University account or University account in the United States. And you don't have that paywall interrupting your access to that material. For the rest of the world, they don't have that luxury. So you have vast swathes of academic research, books, articles, etc., which are unavailable to most people in the world, because most people in the world are not enrolled at universities or don't work at universities, etc. This information could well be very useful, but it's not able to be got hold of. And academic books, as you'll well know if you've ever thought of actually buying a book, can be really, really expensive. So, LibGen exists as a service which provides free access to academic materials. It is not legal. What they're doing is copyright theft on a massive scale. The copyright for those things is owned by the journals, basically, that publish that information. That's their copyright. When I write something for a journal, I have to sign a declaration saying the copyright is now owned by that journal, that publisher. The United States government shut down LibGen and the Z Library back in October last year. Repeated copyright infringements led to a complete shutdown. They went after the root and branch directories that held the network on the internet. So they shut down the URLs, for example, and shut down a lot of the hosting things that they have going on. But Z Library, a big depository of academic books and non-academic books as well. You can find just about any book you want on Z Library if you look for it. Still exists. It exists now on what we call the dark web. The dark web conjures up lots of very, very odd images in people's heads. However, it is not as sinister perhaps as you think. Hence, if you do want access to this resource, just like Caitlin is doing now, you may email me and I will tell you how to do it. And I think, did I send you those instructions? And they work, right? Yeah. So, and to you, Carol, right? I sent you a list of instructions.
You told me that to download Tor, and I figured out that there are a few websites like zlibrary.something, and then I figured out the right one.
Yeah, and the links are always more difficult to understand because they're... Anyway, if I send you a link, you'll understand what I mean, right? Okay. Jem, do the module review. Do the module review. Like now.
Okay.
I'm not putting pressure on it. So, the architecture of the dark web can give us some understanding of how we might have alternatives to social media. So what I want to do is just take you through what I mean by the architecture of the dark web. That will lead us on to some of the consequences of social media as it's architecturally laid out now. In particular, a very important topic which you may well have encountered in other modules called the filter bubble. This is an idea that was coined in 2011 by a researcher at Google called Eli Pariza. It's become a really important catch-all term for the kind of algorithmic governance on social media that leads us to having singular kinds of content given to us. And Pariza's idea back in 2011 was that this is a very, very bad idea because it's going to foster division in society. What you're eventually going to have is, because of filter bubbles, you can have one group of people who believe one thing and never encounter arguments for the other side, and another group of people who believe in one thing and never encounter those arguments. Pariza saw this as being very, very bad for democratic societies because it will mean that you have what we call polarization. You simply have two camps of ideas who will never agree. Whereas the purpose of democracy actually is you can have polar opposites, but they have to converge in the middle to get things done. Pariza saw in 2011 that actually the structure of the internet itself, but also the companies that were controlling the internet like Google, Facebook, etc., would lead us into a polarized society, effectively. And unsurprisingly, within 5 years, he was proved absolutely right. If you look at the US election of 2016, if you look at the Brexit election in the United Kingdom of 2016, and in fact, if you look at any number of elections around the world during that period of time, you will see that polarization in action. Two polar opposite opinions running against one another with no consensus in the middle. And that's almost become the model of how contemporary societies work, where we all shout at one another from completely opposing viewpoints without finding any ground to move forwards in the middle, which is actually the purpose of liberal democracy, is to discuss these ideas and then come to a consensual opinion. This is exactly what Jürgen Habermas argued in his idea about the public sphere. The public sphere would work in this way for rational critical debate to come to a consensus of opinion. Pariza's idea here was that that isn't going to happen. So we'll unpack that a little bit as a consequence of the architecture of the internet and the architecture of social media. I'll have a look at some of the alternatives to corporate social media that have been launched. One I haven't put up there is a social network called Trust. Does anyone know anything about Trust? Good. I'm happy. I am pleased about this. Trust has one very famous user. Would anyone like to guess who that famous user is? He was indicted for arrest last night, if anyone needs a clue.
Donald Trump.
It's Donald Trump, yeah, who next Tuesday, in front of the world's media, is going to get handcuffed and fingerprinted, and we're all looking forward to that very, very much. This is what happened when you pay off porn stars. So, Donald Trump set up his own social network. A lot of people don't know this. Trump banned from Twitter, banned from Facebook, banned from just about everything, because that's what you do with lunatics, is ban them. Set up last year his own social network called Trust. So I'll come on to Trust a little bit when I talk about this network, Gab, because they share some very similar features. Gab still exists, although it exists in a really weird space at the moment. But Trust is, if you like, a pretty much a like-for-like copy of what Gab is anyway. But it is basically Donald Trump's platform for talking shit. And shit he does talk as well. We'll have a look at some of the alternatives to Western social media cultures as well, and try and understand how the social context of those and cultural context of those leads to difference as well. So, firstly, let's have a look at the dark web. This diagram here gives us an idea of the structure of the internet itself. as represented by a structural diagram of what is visible and what is invisible on the World Wide Web. World Wide Web and the internet are not the same thing, but World Wide Web is a very good illustrative protocol to show us what the dark web actually operates as. So the dark web is the World Wide Web that exists on what we call dark nets, overlay networks or through various permissions to access. Websites and content that, as we understand it online, only makes up about 5% of what the internet actually is. The rest of it is a whole bunch of stuff that we never see. This is largely protocols, and that's stuff that we don't have to worry about. The internet is basically built on a series of protocols which allow the transfer of information between different nodes on the network. Most famous of which is probably the TCP/IP stack. Again, don't worry about any of this, all right? You know, unless you want to have a career in network architecture, you're not going to have to know this stuff. So most of this is basically made up of the code which the internet runs on. As such, don't worry. And that stuff is pretty benign. It's interesting to know that, you know, the internet isn't some kind of neutral thing. It's all made by people, and those protocols and codes have biases in them, just like anything made by human beings. It's all biased. But it's fairly benign stuff. This, as illustrated by the diagram, is called the deep web. So, if you like, you have the shallow web, which is the stuff that you see on top, the content layer. And then the deep web is all the stuff that sits underneath it to make sure everything is running. The dark web is a very small portion of the deep web, represented here by this very black blob at the bottom of it. And it is at the bottom of everything. It is the murky, horrible, vile side of human life. If you consider the city that we live in at the moment, Swansea, the visible part of Swansea would be the nice stuff. And I'm using 4% as a roughly thing, because about 4% of Swansea is nice. Okay? You know, I don't know, whatever you consider to be the nice bit of Swansea, that's it. Then the rest of it is the stuff you don't kind of see. You know, Terminal, places like that. Right? And this bit at the bottom, that is bottom line. It is the worst bit. Okay? It's the bit where, like, you know, you go every couple of years to visit your car that was burned out, you know, in a homage, you know, to lay a wreath. Swansea can be mapped onto this diagram, but the web and how it works can also be mapped on. The important thing to understand about the deep web is that search engines and algorithms operate on the visible web. So all these things that I've been talking about all the way through the module, like how Google collects information, how Facebook collects information, algorithmic profiling, algorithmic governance, they operate at that very high visible level. This deep web underneath, this is not indexed. There is no easy way to find your way around it. When you go searching for Z library on a Tor network, you're not going to get very far, I'm afraid, because it does not work that way. The stuff that appears on that network is not indexed. There are reasons for that. It's not like no one's... people have tried. You actually technically can't index stuff on that network because it doesn't exist in the same way as the stuff at the top. The stuff at the top has static IP addresses, static URLs. Things in the deep web don't have that kind of thing. They're protocols, they're functions. They can't be indexed in the same way. And indeed, stuff on the dark web shares that as well. It's unindexable. You can't find it in the same ways that you find stuff. That means getting hold of some of the things on the dark web can be a real challenge. You have to go into different networks to find material. For example, can anyone tell me of something that you could buy on the dark web that you can't buy off Amazon?
Weapons.
Toes.
Yeah.
Human toes.
I mean, you can also
I like it. I like it a lot. You can buy human toes on the dark web. That could be made up, but I actually don't think it is. I believe that's true. Weapons, you said.
Weapons.
Yeah. Now you can buy weapons off Amazon. You know, you can buy weapons off Amazon. I could buy, I don't know, a brick, I suppose, and hit someone with it. That's a weapon, right? In the right hands. But we're talking about serious shit here. We're talking guns, right? Yeah. Anything else we can buy on the dark web?
Drugs.
Drugs. Vast, huge quantities of illegal drugs. I'm not giving, by the way, this isn't like an advocacy lecture here, alright? You know, I'm not telling you to go and do this. I'm glad that hardly any of you know about it, because you don't have the skills to find this stuff. Anything else?
Human organs.
Human organs, yeah, that's no problem. Yeah, if you need a liver, you know, yeah, dark web is your boy. Anything else?
Exotic animals.
Well, I suppose, yeah. Hitmen are very popular on the dark web. You know, very accessible. You know, if you need a hitman, that's where you go. Drugs mostly. Drugs is the most popular commodity on it. If you want to steal some Bitcoin off someone, go to the dark web. People will know how to do it. Basically, we're talking about a vast infrastructure of illegal activity. Now, just because the visible web can be indexed, it means that authorities can monitor activity on it. It is easier for authorities to actually monitor what goes on between individuals on that network. In the deep web, you can buy and sell drugs. Police can't crack this. Can't be done.
What about MI6?
Not a hope. Simply because the way that it works does not allow that to happen. So, I'll give you a very simple reason why I use the dark web for things. I use the dark web for two main purposes. One is to get free books, which I like, because otherwise my bill from Amazon per month would be running into the thousands. Two, you'll hear the TV show Succession.
Yeah.
Okay, some people have, some nods. Succession, very popular American television show, really good, I quite enjoy it. It's only available in the UK on Sky, on the Sky Atlantic channel. So in order to get Sky Atlantic, I have to subscribe either to Sky or to Now TV, which is like £10 a month. I don't want to pay £10 a month, right? Because I resent paying money for things. So I go on the dark web to download torrents of television programs that I can't be bothered to pay for, download them to my computer, and then run a VPN so I can download those for free and the authorities can't catch me. You might think, well, Leighton, how can't the authorities catch you? Let me explain. So, you have, in this section of the internet, a series of what we call peer-to-peer networks. This is not a giant network out on its own. These are smaller, contained networks which are much harder to break into. The protocols of them are much more difficult to find. But there is also a wonderful little trick that happens when you access this kind of thing. Let's say I wanted to download illegal material at the university on my university account. What would happen is that the university would be pinged an email by the copyright holder saying, this person on your network has accessed or has tried to illegally access our content. We can identify that because we are tracking for that online. And they can pin it down to my exact IP address, which is held by the university. And then the university will say, Leighton, you've been very, very naughty using the university network. Please cease and desist doing this and delete all files, or there will be disciplinary action against you. You might think, how do you know all this, Leighton? Well, guess what? I've been caught doing it. So, I know exactly what the email says. So, when I'm using the Tor browser, I don't have a static IP address. What the Tor network does is take my original IP address and send it several 100,000 times around the world, instantly, making it absolutely untraceable. Because the minute that somebody saw that there's a problem with copyright, say like, somebody in Kazakhstan is downloading this film. And then they'll look at the IP in Kazakhstan and think, now that's not in Kazakhstan, where's the next one in the chain? It would take them several decades to get back to me. By that time I'll be dead. And they're happy to see me at that point, because I'll be ash, scattered on the beach, in the sea, now ephemeral forever. Good luck, Warner Bros. I ain't paying up, alright? I'm already left this mortal plane, and I shall be going like that to you from whatever circle of hell that I now exist in. So, these protocols make tracking and tracing anything impossible. This means that the kind of principles that social networks operate on, mass data harvesting of individuals, cannot be done on this part of the web. It's impossible to do so. You can't keep a tab on an individual in the same way, because all the information is actually dynamic rather than static. The whole business model of social media relies on us having static, stable digital identities over time. What this part of the web is all about is dynamic, changing identities over time. You cannot keep your finger on that person. Therefore, we are ostensibly free from all the stuff that goes on in everyday life if we access this kind of network. Why is it doing this? So, you can't just go on the dark web. There isn't, a thing that's like dark web here. Ding, 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 ding. That doesn't exist. You have to have some technical proficiency to actually do this. But identities and locations of users will stay anonymous on this system. And we use what we call layered encryption systems, or onions, meaning the so that process by which we spin a static IP around the world loads and loads of times so it becomes untraceable, that's called an onion router. You basically add layers and layers and layers on top of the original until, if anyone wants to find you, they're having to peel back the layers all the time. And onion is used as a metaphor. Why?
Because it has layers.
Hmm?
Layers. It has layers.
Not because of layers. Onions do something to you. Make you cry. You will end up crying if you try to do this, because it is so complex to do. Now, interestingly, the most popular way of accessing the dark web is through a browser that you can download called Tor. Tor is a US government project, would you believe? Funded by the US government through the DARPA program. DARPA program is actually the same program that funded the internet in the 1960s. The creation of the internet came out of a DARPA-led program. Tor came through the same program. It is not owned by the US government, but the principles of it were actually US government and US military in particular principles. What they did was unleash something that they can't actually control and they can't decipher. They made it it's not that it's made really well, it's just that the principles of how they made it meant that they can't, if you go on it, they're not like looking over the top of you. Because what they designed the system to do meant even the US government can't trace you on it. So they made a thing which got kind of out of hand a little bit.
Was it on purpose?
It was absolutely on purpose, because people in US government and the US military in particular were looking at data security a very, very long time ago, and wanted to establish ways which they could communicate with people which wouldn't be traceable by people who were hostile to the United States. So they came up with this way, an absolutely fail-safe way of doing it. Which meant even they couldn't trace what's going on. Because you have different branches of the US government, they don't necessarily want the FBI looking at what the CIA is doing. So they created a system by where even that was impossible. As soon as it got into civilian use, they're like, oh crap. We can't do anything about this. Darknet encryption technology routes users' data through a large number of intermediate servers, which protects and guarantees our anonymity, basically. It's not even a very sophisticated system. It's a really simple idea. It's technologically quite sophisticated, but really the idea is really easy to understand. Usually, you have one server. You log on through one thing. This thing is saying, well, we're just going to do that thousands and thousands of times instantaneously, so you become untraceable. It's a really, really simple idea. Dark web, most importantly, keeps us anonymous. And anonymity is an absolute anathema to the operations and business models of the major digital companies. Anonymity does not work for Facebook, does not work for Twitter, does not work for Snapchat, does not work for Google, does not work for Amazon. You name any company, anonymity does not work for them. We need to be not anonymous. We need to be visible in order for their business models to work. This is a way of stopping that from happening. The result of the dark web is effectively a lot of communication between people which is completely anonymous, no tracking, no commercialization, no commodification of people, no sharing of information with partners, none of that going on. Which is why it's really attractive to criminals. If you want to sell drugs, don't do it on Facebook. That's dumb. Don't put a tweet out saying, Coke for sale. That's really, really stupid thing to do. But you can go onto a forum on the dark web and post something. Now that's a different story. Virtually untraceable. Other people will have to know how to find it, but there's always a way of doing that. I mean, it's used not just for fun things like drugs, unfortunately. Terrorists coordinate terror attacks using the dark web. One of the most extensive uses of the dark web is the exchange of materials which are illegal to be exchanged in any other way. They're illegal to be exchanged on the dark web as well. Paedophile sort of materials and things like this. It's also illegal to exchange them on the dark web. It's just incredibly hard to find where those things are being exchanged. So, what do we usually see? Pornography, pharmaceuticals, weapons, financial fraud sites, blogs, drugs, fake documentation services for anyone who needs a passport. I'd go on the dark web and have a look. Yeah. Carding, does anyone know what a carding site is?
With people's details.
Worse than that.
Really?
I don't want people's details. I just want their credit card numbers.
They just buy anything.
Yeah. You exchange a little bit of money for access to somebody's credit card. And then you just use their credit card. Make sure you've bought all the stuff. Off you go. Happy days. Carding sites exist and are very popular. So the dark web is a lot of fun. Jamie Bartlett is one of the most important people who's written about the dark web. This book is a little old now, nearly coming up to 10 years old, but it's still fundamentally the most important book about it. Bartlett thinks that the dark web is actually kind of an interestingly good thing. Because if you operate in a system like this, it breeds a sort of innovation of how you do things. In order to get things done in the dark web, we can actually do things which will become part of society afterwards when they're proved to be good ways of doing things. For example, trading using Bitcoin. The dark web relies heavily on cryptocurrencies because financial transactions with money using banks can be traced. You don't want to go buying vast quantities of guns and drugs using your debit card. That's not a wise idea. Cryptocurrencies work in a different way, where the transaction itself can be masked and hidden, and it is very hard to break down those transactional blocks. Therefore, cryptocurrency leads itself to being used in the dark web as a mode of currency exchange. That currency exchange has become more widespread in everyday society now. And indeed, if we look into just the near future, when we're going to have, things like the metaverse, and how are we going to actually exchange, currency for goods and services on a virtual network, it will be through a cryptocurrency platform. So, interestingly, Bartlett argues that the darknet and the dark web in particular are actually better for consumers. At the moment, if you want to buy a book, where'd you go? Amazon. Right? If you want to buy anything, where'd you go? Amazon, right? If you want to buy anything, you go to Amazon. Amazon takes a cut of everything that is bought. That's fair, right? People on the dark web aren't taking cuts. This is a marketplace. There's no intermediary here. You are trading instantly with people. So it's consumer friendly in that way. It's decentralized. There is no dominant company like Amazon who can dominate prices, who can structure how much something costs because it dominates the market so much. And this is a genuine market. There's supply and demand principles going on. Prices might go up, prices might go down. But you can easily come to some sort of accommodation because there are no intermediaries that sit between the consumer and the seller at this point. Bartlett sees that as a good thing. There have been attempts to map the deep web. I've given you a link there if you want to follow, if you want to find out more about this. But the difficulty of doing that very thing is why this might be a good thing for social networking in the future. Basically, the argument exists like this. The clear web, or the visible web, has a number of problems, which I've been covering extensively throughout the last 9 weeks. The dark web might solve a lot of those problems, because the surveillance and privacy issues that we've encountered, not just in the last lecture, but all the way through this module, don't exist on that part of the internet. There are no issues with surveillance and privacy. There can't be. You can't be surveilled. You are immediately private. So the issues that we might have as a society with a certain number small number of companies dominating data, and therefore not only dominating knowledge of what we do, but also pushing us towards doing other things based on their algorithms, cannot happen in this space. It can't be done. That is a method of getting rid of those problems. And people have tried to adopt the principles of the dark web in order to get rid of some of these problems. Now, using the dark web itself isn't really an option in doing this. What we'd have to do is adopt some of the principles of how the dark web operates. You need too much technical expertise to use the dark web in any meaningful way. It's not for amateurs. Going on and using Z library, that's scratching the surface stuff. That's fine. Just about anyone can do that. Although, actually, in my experience, quite a lot of people can't even do that. They don't really understand how it works. There's technical expertise in doing anything beyond that. You do really have to know your way around code, and you have to know your way around the architecture of the internet a little bit to get anywhere. This is why when you were searching for like Z library, you weren't going to get very far. It really doesn't work on the same principle that when you're on the visible web or clear web, you can just put something into a search engine and it will pop up. That's not how it works. You need to know a bit about the architecture of how this all fits together. So, what would happen if we started to adopt some of the principles of the dark web? We could get away from commercialization, planetary level surveillance, and we could also get away from these things, which are very important. The reason why some people think these ideas are important for the future of social networking is because we could avoid filter bubbles and algorithmic governance in particular. These are critically important topics. Algorithmic governance first. So, within the conditions of big data, an epistocracy emerges. What a word this is. One of my favourite words in the English language. Epistocracy. Constitutes a particular kind of governance based on computer-programmed algorithms. So, my friends, would anyone like to venture a guess what the hell epistocracy means? I'm here to educate and inform, but I would be delighted if somebody could tell me what they think this word means. If I was to tell you that you could break it up into two, would that help? Epi and stocracy.
Is it related with epistemology like truth and democracy?
It is very much related to the word epistemology, but epistemology does not mean what you just said. Epistemology means something else. Does anyone know what the word epistemology means? Epistemology, my friends, is a branch of philosophy which is concerned with knowledge. If you are arguing about epistemology, you are arguing about the conditions of what it is to know something. Epistemology is all about what is known and what that thing is.
So it's not finding the truth, it's about...
How can you know?
Okay.
And what do you know? And what is important about what you know?
So
Truth doesn't actually come into it.
So epistocracy would be a system where the most powerful people in that system are people who are able to know the most.
Not to know the most. 99.9% of the way there. It is not about knowing the most. It is about knowing the most important thing. An epistocracy is a society which is based on the rule of people who know a particular thing. What Estland was arguing in 1993 was that we were moving into an epistocracy where people who know about computation, code, and computer-based programming would become dominant because they are the people who hold power in a society where everything is based on the operation of computers. If everything runs on computing, the people who know about computing will become dominant in that society and will become, if you like, the new ruling class of society. You might think, well, has that happened, Leighton? Who is the richest man on earth?
Jeff Bezos.
Bezos.
And
Does he fit into an epistocracy based around computational knowledge?
Yes.
Oh yeah. Who else are some very wealthy men that we can name?
Musk.
Musk. Is he part of this epistocracy? Yes. Who else is very wealthy?
Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg. Come on, yeah. Bill Gates.
Dorsey.
Yes, Dorsey, etc. The wealthiest people in our Western society. Are you two done? Okay. Thank you. The wealthiest people and the most powerful people in our society fit with this epistocracy which has developed since the 1990s. So, how did they get there? Is the next important thing that we have to understand. The companies that they run and own rely on algorithms to collect, collate, and organise data. This is all the stuff I've been talking about since the beginning of this module. And these algorithms both assist in how data is structured, processed, and communicated, and structure and constrain how users interact with systems. Control. They exercise control on the rest of the population. They structure what we can do and what we see. How we see the world and how we interact with the world. This becomes fundamentally powerful. So when we say epistocracy, what we're saying is the fundamental part of this ruling class in society is they develop systems which shape the way that we interact with the world itself. Therefore, they're in incredibly powerful situations, right? Is this a good thing? Is it a good thing to have a society where ultimately power on how we see the world sits in the hands of people that we did not choose, we did not elect, that have never stood for election, that have political views which are to the contrary of the vast majority of people in those societies, and who operate outside traditional systems of taxation and economic fairness. Is this a good thing or not? I will leave that up to you to decide. You might be able to discern from my words what I think. So, algorithmic governance, on the whole, is not a great thing for normal people. It is a wonderful thing for a very, very minute part of the general population who have been elevated to positions of such extraordinary wealth that they could literally spend hundreds of millions of pounds every day and never, ever run out of money. Jeff Bezos is so wealthy that, you know, he could do anything and he would still be incredibly wealthy. He could just go outside and set fire to $1 billion. Do you think that matters to him? Not at all.
I heard he's got a boat with a boat on it.
Yeah. What? A 2-tier boat?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. He's got a spaceship shaped like a penis. He don't give a fuck. You know, you've seen that thing he takes off in, right? I would not go into space in that thing. I feel like I would look ridiculous. You're looking at me like I'm making this shit up. I'm not making this shit up. He has got a spaceship that looks like a penis. He doesn't care. He's got billions of dollars. What the fuck does he care, you know? I think he's just doing it to troll people. I think it's amazing. Evgeny Morozov refers to this entire system of algorithmic governance as a web of invisible barbed wire that traps us, basically, where systems of control constrain and construct our worlds without visibility and without having us having requisite knowledge to scrutinise those structures. Morozov's point about knowledge there is extremely important. That's why I use that quote. What Morozov says is that we exist in a society where there's what's known as an asymmetrical relationship. A very small number of people have certain knowledge about how systems work, but the vast majority of people do not. And that small number of people exist as the epistocracy, and the rest of us exist in what's called a digital feudalism. You have the kings over there, very small in number, and the rest of us are the peasants who have no access to power because we don't have the knowledge of how power works in contemporary society. And we can't get that knowledge. We are not offered that knowledge. You're going to say, well, like, what if I do a computer science degree? Will I get the knowledge then? No. No, you won't. Because algorithms don't work that way. In a computer science degree, you might learn how to write some algorithms. Wonderful. Will you learn how to pull apart Amazon's algorithms? No. Amazon's algorithms are hidden behind masses of encryption. They don't just fucking give them out to people to understand. The people who programmed those algorithms in Amazon don't understand the algorithm. It is put together by thousands of different programmers, and then machine learning principles are applied. Bezos don't understand the algorithm I'm going to show you. He has no clue. Elon Musk said today on Twitter that he was going to release the Twitter algorithm as open source. Elon Musk hasn't got a fucking clue what he's talking about. I hope people know now, like from last year when Elon Musk took over Twitter, that he is an idiot. Right? And he always has been a massive... This is a guy who was selling flamethrowers a couple of years ago. He is an imbecile of the highest order. But we revere Musk. He's worth billions. His tech company's doing so well. Yeah, because we view him as part of this epistocracy. Smart guy with worth billions must be one of the kings. He's an absolute moron. He is not releasing Twitter's algorithm. He is releasing a tiny part of what Twitter's algorithm is.
What about open sourcing OpenAI? Would this also be a tiny fracture?
Yeah, minuscule.
And what about, he said that he didn't patent the Tesla thing, and that speed up the production of
Well, it's
electrical
just
cars.
I mean, I'm glad that he didn't do
You know
that
what
for
I mean? So
Tesla.
he
Yeah,
did
yeah,
open
because
for
I mean,
other companies.
I'd really like him to release all those Tesla sort of programs, because then people could realise what absolute pieces of shit those cars are. And then if you're paying £50,000 for one of those, you are an idiot also, because those cars are junk, basically.
But they give data.
The primary purpose of them is to collect data.
And I
basically.
didn't know that the cars collect more data than phones.
Yes.
And they're worth billions, so the car could be for free. And it would be a great
Musk
business
should be paying people to drive those cars.
Yeah.
Is the truth. In an honest society, Elon Musk would be paying us to drive. Let's take 5 minutes. It gets better from here.
Is there any evaluation of Morozov? Like someone who says like, okay, you're this critical.
Do you know this? Yeah, you'll find, even in just a Google search, you will find quite a lot of evaluation of Morozov, actually. I mean, I think Morozov is pretty much spot on.
What about alternatives?
He's very difficult to criticise, really. The major criticism of Morozov's view is that he is biased.
Yeah, what the bias? What's the
Yeah,
bias?
well, he comes from a particular epistocratic position himself, which ignores other views, put it like that. I'll leave it up to you to have a look. I mean, there must be a million blog posts on why people think. Not that Morozov is wrong, but that Morozov has some issues.
Yeah, exactly. I asked ChatGPT to provide solutions for technological determinism, and it gave some books and some sources, like Societal Approach or something.
Okay.
So there is something.
Yeah, there is stuff out there, yeah. Oh, by the way, Morozov doesn't think that we're condemned to this. He thinks you can fix it. His answers to how you can fix it are a bit weird.
Okay.
He's basically advocating a form of communism, which isn't, considering where he's from, is kind of interesting, because I think he's Belarusian. I'm pretty sure he's from Minsk.
Really? And he says for communism.
Well, I don't think he realises what he's saying is the problem. I think that's the big issue. He doesn't actually realise that he's advocating communism. But that's a weird thing with a lot of people from like Ukraine and Russia and Belarus and places like that. Often the solutions they come up with are like, you had that. you don't really realise that's what you had already. You kind of argue, well, basically what you want is the Soviet Union, right? Yeah, well, we've had that, it didn't work. Okay?
Because they say arguments, they don't mean it directly, but that's what it comes to.
Conclusion.
Yeah, that's the
logical conclusion.
The same with globalists.
Yeah, it's kind of there was a movement in the early 2010s about data communism, without a hint of irony of like what that meant. It's like,